The story of the Great Child and the Dire Mother is one of the more disturbing tales in the 13 Ghosts. But before I get into their stories, I have to lead with the trigger warning. There are some very intense themes. There are two videos today, one for the Dire Mother and one for the Great Child. So before I play the clip in a few seconds, if you are sensitive to themes of child abuse, rape, kidnapping, and human excrement, please take this time to keep scrolling. If you are choosing to stay along, please go ahead and watch the clip. It's about a minute long, and then I will hop back on.
Just ghosts I caught had to be Harold Shelburn, the Great Child. His 3-foot-tall mother, Margaret Shelburn, was wildly overprotective of her son, smothering and spoiling him from infancy, and never stopping as he grew. Harold could barely care for himself, and as a result, remained in diapers his entire life. Mocked at every turn, they sought refuge with the traveling freak show run by a man named Jimbo. Even a life in the circus was no escape, as they were continually taunted and tormented by their own twisted kind. One night, some of the freaks kidnapped Margaret as a cruel joke. In a panic-fueled rage, Harold destroyed the entire carnival in search of his mother. He finally found her. She had died of suffocation. Filled with hatred, Harold grabbed an axe and had his revenge on the freaks, displaying what was left of them in the carnival for every paying customer to see. Jimbo found out what had happened. He had Harold mutilated beyond what you or I can comprehend. Well, maybe you. And you thought your family was weird. Margaret Shelburn, the Dire Mother, was a shy woman who could never stand up for herself, partly because she rose to only a mere 3 feet in height. Since childhood, she was stared at for her pint size. Her own mother would even sometimes dress her like a doll. Margaret didn't care, as long as she found some perverse form of acceptance. A carnival barker named Jimbo put her on display in his freak show. Life was horrible, being an attraction for people to gawk at. One night, while sweeping up a donkey pen, she was raped by the tall man. She spawned a beastly offspring of her own. Oh, she loved her dear son Harold, more than life itself, never letting him out of her sight. The circus workers teased and tormented them relentlessly, a conflict that played itself out with bloody resolve that left nearly the entire circus free of life, including poor Margaret and Harold. Well, as they say, there's no business like show business.
So Harold and his mother Margaret are the 8th and 9th members of the Black Zodiac, making them the equivalent of a Scorpio and Sagittarius. Now again, I'm not too aware of Zodiac lore, so you guys are going to have to tell me if they fit the bill. But of all of the ghosts that we meet down in the basement, the Great Child and the Dire Mother are the only two that are shown in tandem together. You won't see the Dire Mother without the Great Child and vice versa. So it makes it even more menacing when they eventually get released from their cells. However, seeing these two together is still less of a threat than witnessing the Jackal, the Hammer, or the Juggernaut outside of their chambers. Because even though these two appear to be menacing and threatening, they have very low aggression. At best, the Great Child does a lot of brooding. He does hold his axe. That doesn't mean that you should play around with him. He's still somebody who can kill you, as he was able to do in life. But they're not necessarily aggressive. They're not pursuant like the Pilgrimess. And so your chances of survival if you encounter these two are elevated compared to your chances of survival with other ghosts. So the strangest thing to me about this pair is the fact that Cyrus Criticos, the man who read and created the Ocularis Infernum, and the reason that the Criticos family is in the house, stated that these two were the weirdest ghosts in his collection. And he said this in regards to the Great Child. Now, I think this is weird considering some of the other ghosts that are in the basement along with this duo, but I can see why. The Great Child and the Dire Mother were a toxic pair. The Great Child is one who was infantilized by his mother and stunted at the developmental age of a toddler. So he's incapable of doing anything. But what's odd is that he had all of the knowledge and foresight to grab an axe and start raging once his mother was taken and killed, sadly. But I also find it odd that when you look at them in their containment cells, you see the Dire Mother and the Great Child, she looks to be feeding him. Now, what initially appears to be food on the Great Child's bib is actually human excrement. It's vomit. And this is actually a small but subtle change from the way that the characters died in the OG script. Now, originally, the Great Child was supposed to have suffocated and choked on some food, and he tried to vomit it up. He couldn't, and so he suffocated on that vomit. The Dire Mother then, as a result, was crushed under the weight of the Great Child as he was falling and suffocating, and there the two died at the same time. Now, one of the coolest details that we get in the movie happens when Dennis is down in the basement and realizes that there's containment cells everywhere. When he puts his glasses on, he sees the dire mother and the great child. Now, at first, they appear to be unaware of his presence, but then they look through the containment cell walls and you can see them have this like emotion of shock on their faces. And this tells me that those ghosts are extremely aware of what's going on. And so I thought that was a really cool thing because you just don't know what these ghosts are doing while they're in prison down there. But I'd be curious to learn about that if we get a show. But anyways, let me know if you like the great child and the dire mother and which ghost you look forward to seeing next. And I will see you guys in my next video.